The night Elise called me, it was 23 minutes past 11, and raining the kind of rain that doesn't make an event of itself. Not dramatic, not impressive. Simply committed, the way some things are, the way certain situations arrive and settle before you have been given reasonable notice. She didn't say hello. She said, "Are you far from the Carver Street car park?" "Third level. I'm in my car." A pause, 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then, before I had produced a single reasonable follow-up question, "Don't tell him I called you." I told her I was 12 minutes away. I want to be honest about what I registered during those 12 minutes. I was walking faster than the situation explicitly required. I didn't ask what was wrong before I agreed to come. The car park structure came into view and I had not slowed down, and I told myself, efficiently and convincingly, that none of this signified anything in particular. I have always been a capable person at telling myself things. My name is James Holt. I'm 34. I do structural surveys. I assess buildings before people buy or inherit or legally dispute them. And I walk through what they are about to commit to and tell them plainly what is holding the thing up and what is failing quietly underneath. I am, by occupational formation and prior inclination, someone who notices considerably more than he says. I have been told this reads as calm. It is not always calm. I had known Marcus Farrell for 11 years by the time Elise appeared in his life. The friendship had started in a Stockwell flat that was 4 degrees too cold for 9 months of the year, and neither of us had said a word about it to the other for the entire duration of the tenancy. And this is perhaps the most precise summary available of what kind of friendship it was. The kind that doesn't require occasion. The kind you call when a plan changes, not only when something demands commemoration. I was there the night Marcus met her. A mutual friend's birthday at a restaurant in Bermondsey, 3rd table from the back. The kind of lighting that makes everyone look deliberately considered. I watched him spend 40 minutes being fractionally more attentive to the conversation on his left than was natural. And I had known before he told me. He told me 2 weeks later with the quietly stunned expression of a man who has stepped off a curb he wasn't expecting. I raised my glass. I meant it. And I did not examine the speed at which I raised it, and I moved forward. Elise Calloway worked in exhibit design at a mid-sized natural history museum. She arranged the context around things that needed to be understood, the precise interval between an object and its explanation, the quality of light that made old specimens legible without reducing them to spectacle. She was efficient in conversation and sharp in the particular way that comes from spending careful time with things that require accuracy. When Marcus had been with her 14 months, he proposed in a borrowed garden in the Cotswolds with a ring she had pointed at once in a magazine and then immediately claimed she hadn't meant to point at. She said yes before the question had fully landed. She told the story at the engagement party with the timing of someone who has told it twice before and knows which detail gets the laugh. She had a habit of carrying things. You would see her pick up an object, a menu, a stone from a windowsill, a folded piece of paper from a table, and hold it longer than the object warranted, turning it between her fingers while she was deciding something that had nothing to do with the object itself. It was the habit of a person accustomed to handling things that require patience before they yield what they are. I noticed this the second time I was in a room with her. I mentioned it to no one, including myself. The Carver Street car park smelled of wet concrete and the enclosed staleness of a public structure at night. Her car was the only one on the 3rd level. The interior light was on. She was in the driver's seat with her coat still buttoned, and she had been crying long enough to have moved past the acute stage into something quieter and more settled. The particular stillness of a person who has made peace with the fact that they are going to feel this for a while regardless. The rain on the roof was the specific percussion that makes indoor spaces feel more interior than usual, more sealed off from everything that doesn't belong inside them. I opened the passenger door and got in. She looked at me and said, "You're completely soaked." I said I was aware of that. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. It came out a note too high, and then she looked forward through the windscreen and let out a long, careful breath. On the dashboard, there was a venue printout, folded lengthways, the letterhead just visible at the top edge. She folded it again while I was watching. Then she placed it down with slightly too much care, in the specific way of someone who needs to be deliberate about a small thing because they cannot yet be deliberate about the large one. "We had an argument," she said. I said that was all right. I meant this in the sense that arguments happen, not in the sense that anything about the present situation was unremarkable. "It started about the florist," she said. "That wasn't what it was about." I looked at the rain on the glass. The honest accounting of my situation, sitting in that car, was this. I had been in the company of Elise Calloway on approximately 40 occasions over the previous 2 years, and I had managed each of those occasions in the manner of someone who has identified a structural issue and decided, professionally and deliberately, not to file the formal report. Not because the issue wasn't there, because it had no actionable consequence, and because naming it would have changed the architecture of something I valued more than the alternative. The first moment I should have examined properly was a dinner party at Marcus's flat the previous September. 7 of us around the table. Marcus had made a curry that the preceding week had led him to have a confidence that the final product did not entirely justify. He made a broad, authoritative, and completely incorrect statement about a film that neither Elise nor I had seen. I caught her eye across the table at the exact moment she was working to prevent her face from doing what it wanted to do, not unkind, not mocking. The expression of someone who loves a person specifically enough to find even their wrongness charming rather than irritating. She caught me catching it. Neither of us said anything. The conversation moved on. I thought about it for a portion of the drive home, and then instructed myself, firmly and professionally, not to think about it further. A hairline crack in a wall that has not moved in 30 years is not a crisis. It is a thing you monitor. 6 weeks after that, she called me directly, through Marcus initially, and then on her own when the question became technical, about damp-proofing in a friend's basement conversion. The call lasted 11 minutes. At the end of it, she said, "You explain things without simplifying them into uselessness. Most people don't bother with that." I said something deflecting. She said, "I mean it," and rang off. I sat with my phone for a longer moment than the call warranted, and then I made tea and moved on. At the engagement party, she had carried a small matchbook from the welcome table for the better part of 4 hours. I saw it folding and releasing between her fingers during the speeches. During the warm, social, central hours of the evening, when she was at the heart of things, laughing, performing the happiness that was also real. It disappeared into her pocket. During the margins, the in-between moments at the edges of rooms where she stood with a glass going warm in her hand, it came back out. I noted it the way I note things I have not yet been asked to assess. I did not say anything. I moved forward. There was also the afternoon in February when Marcus asked me to come along to the venue shortlist, a former textile mill in East London that they were considering for the reception. I had come in a professional capacity, ostensibly, to look at the structural condition of the mezzanine floor before they signed anything. Elise had been there before me. She was standing on the mezzanine when I arrived, looking down at the main floor below, and she didn't hear me come up the stairs. She stood very still, one hand on the railing, the particular stillness of a person caught in the middle of a thought they had not expected to have. When she heard my footsteps, she turned, and her composure came back immediately, not performed, just restored, and she said, "The acoustics in here are interesting, aren't they?" I said they were. We talked about the mezzanine floor for several minutes. I did not mention the 30 seconds before she heard me. I filed it, as was my established practice, and we walked back down to where Marcus was talking to the venue coordinator. I thought about those 30 seconds more than twice. And then there was the evening at the end of spring when her flatmate Priya, who I had met 3 or 4 times, who had the pleasant, slightly observant energy of someone who knew more about the people around her than she let on, made a comment over dinner that she had not meant to make. We were talking about a road trip Marcus and I had taken 6 years earlier, and Priya said, "Is this the trip Elise knows better than me? The one you've told about?" And she stopped and glanced at Elise, and Elise looked back at her with the particular expression of someone managing a situation that has briefly gotten away from them, and Priya smoothly redirected the sentence into something about the quality of the restaurant. Marcus didn't notice. I noticed. Elise caught me noticing and held my gaze for one beat past the point where it could have been casual. Then she broke it and reached for her water glass. I am not a person who requires much evidence once a pattern has declared itself. I do not have reliable instincts about exits where certain situations are concerned. The last piece of filed evidence before the car park at a gathering at Marcus's flat in July, she had shown me her phone to play a voice note from her niece, and I had seen, for approximately 3 seconds, before she navigated to her messages, the name of the playlist she had been listening to on the drive over. It was called For Driving and Not Thinking. I am aware this is not an unusual name for a playlist. I am also aware that people name things honestly when they are naming them for themselves, without having yet decided who else might read them. I had thought about that playlist title twice between July and November. Both times I had filed it promptly and moved on. None of these individual observations were significant. Taken together, they formed the kind of pattern I would have flagged in any structure I was professionally responsible for. Not an emergency, but a building that was, clearly and consistently, telling you something about what was happening underneath the surface. I had been aware of the pattern for the better part of a year. I had not been ready to write the report. In the car, she didn't speak for several minutes, and I didn't fill it. The rain was doing its work on the roof. Her hands were folded in her lap. I was aware of the quality of her silence, not collapsed, not closed, but interior, settled somewhere just behind the composure. I was aware of the specific smell of cold air and the hand lotion she used, and the particular warmth the car holds when 2 people have been sitting in it long enough. I was being very still, not as a strategy, but because I had nothing better to offer, and because something in the situation required not disturbing it. I was also aware, in a register I was not going to acknowledge directly, of the precise distance between us on the seats. The way she was sitting turned very slightly in my direction without having made a decision to turn. The way her breathing had evened out since I had got in the specific way that people's breathing evens when they are next to someone they have been trying to get to. I noted all of this the way you note what a building is doing in the absence of anyone to report it to. Her hands were still. Not the stillness of calm, the stillness of someone who has stopped managing and is now just waiting to see what happens. I knew the difference. I had cataloged the difference on approximately 40 occasions. That is not a comforting thought. That is an accurate one. She said, "Do you think some things are decided before you're ready for them?" I said I thought that was probably true. That structures tell you what is happening underneath long before anything shows on the surface. You have to know how to look. More than that, you have to be willing to see it once you do. She sat with that. Then Marcus says you make everything about buildings. He's not wrong. I think it's a very precise way of seeing things, she said. Simple, unperforming, the kind of simple that lands differently than the elaborate. She was quiet again. Then she said, I don't think I called you tonight because of the argument. She was looking forward. Her voice was level in the specific way that voices go level when the thing underneath them is not. I think I called you because there is something I have been carrying for a while, and it got heavy enough tonight that I couldn't manage it alone. And when I thought about who I could call, not who I should call, who I actually wanted, she stopped. It was you, specifically you, and I think I've known for some time what that means. I've just been deciding not to look at it directly. She reached for the printout on the dashboard, held it, set it back down. I called your name once, in a dream, and Marcus was asleep beside me. He didn't hear. I lay there for a long time deciding what it meant, and concluding that it meant nothing. And then I spent the following week being slightly more careful than usual around the word nothing, which is something people do when a thing has a shape. I waited. Say the accurate thing, she said, not the one that keeps this manageable. I looked at her directly. The first evening Marcus brought you to meet people, I said. You asked me a question about a building across the road. In passing, we were all putting coats on to leave. It wasn't a polite question. You actually wanted to know. I gave you an answer that was too detailed for a coat-putting-on situation, and you followed every part of it. And then you asked a follow-up that was sharper than the original question. I paused. I drove home thinking about it for longer than I found comfortable. And then I made a decision, which I have been remaking consistently for approximately 2 years. To file it. To categorize it as something without legitimate consequence and to move forward. She was watching me. She had gone slightly, inwardly still, not away, but absorbing. Her fingers closed once around the edge of her coat sleeve and then released it. I filed the dinner in September, the phone call about the damp proofing, the matchbook at the engagement party, the 30 seconds on a mezzanine floor in February when you didn't hear me come up the stairs and you were standing at the railing being still in a way I had no professional right to interpret. A playlist name I saw on your phone for 3 seconds in July. I stopped. I have been a very thorough person about all of it. I have, if anything, been professionally great at this particular form of internal management. I held her gaze. And I am sitting in this car at nearly midnight in the rain, and the management is not doing very much. The rain had slowed, not stopped, made the kind of decision before stopping. She went still. Not away from me, still in my direction. In the specific way she goes still when she has heard something that is going to require proper time to hold. Then I said, you don't have to go any further with this. If you want the version of tonight where none of it was said, where this was just a hard evening and the argument was about the florist after all, I will walk back out into that rain and I won't bring any of this with me. You have my word on that completely. She heard it. I watched it land. She said, I see the door. I don't want it. Her voice was completely level. The kind of level that belongs to decisions already made rather than decisions being made. After a moment, she reached across and placed her hand over mine on the seat between us. Not a gesture. A weight. Gentle, deliberate, warm. Both a question and something past a question. She said, I don't know what comes next. Next doesn't have to be tonight, I said. She left her hand where it was. At some point after that, I couldn't tell you precisely when, her phone alarm went off on the dashboard. A meeting reminder. 10 o'clock, Tuesday morning. She looked at it for one still second. Then she started to laugh. Quietly, genuinely, with her hand still over mine, at the absolute specificity of being interrupted by a Tuesday morning calendar notification while sitting in a concrete car park at midnight in the rain. I found this, in the moment, the most relieving sound I had encountered in a considerable time. The kind of laughter that tells you exactly who someone is and makes you certain you want to be around them for a long time. What followed was not quick and not clean, and I will not compress it into something tidier than it actually was. Elise and Marcus ended the engagement in December, after 3 months she handled at her own pace, in her own order, on her own terms. She told him the essential truth, that she had been retreating toward the wedding rather than arriving at it, and that neither of them deserved that version of things. He called me 2 days later. We talked for 90 minutes. That conversation did not contain everything, and it contained enough. He was hurt in the specific way of someone for whom a thing has confirmed something they had been quietly not looking at. Some things get filed by everyone involved. We did not speak properly for 5 months. He rang in late March. We had lunch, and we did not resolve it over that lunch, because friendships 11 years old do not resolve in a single sitting. We resolved it over the following year, gradually, without ceremony, the way that kind of friendship repairs, not through one conversation that fixes it, but through enough subsequent ones that the distance slowly stops being the thing you notice. He is still my oldest friend. That is the honest conclusion of this, not the convenient one. 6 weeks after the car park, Elise and I had coffee in a place she chose. She brought the small fern she had been unsuccessfully attempting to keep alive for several months. I looked at it seriously, the way the situation called for. I told her it was root-bound, needed repotting, and was receiving approximately 40% more direct light than it could handle. She said, "Say something normal so I know you're going to be all right." I said the espresso machine in this particular establishment was producing a sound that concerned me from a structural standpoint. She took the fern home and repotted it and texted me a photograph 3 weeks later when it put out a new leaf, and I found this, for reasons I was not going to examine, disproportionately good news. By the second winter she had 4 boxes in my flat, and the fern had survived. And she still corrects my grammar in restaurant menus, and I still notice when she is holding something longer than the thing requires. She knows I notice. She puts things down earlier now. Not always, but often enough. Years later, when people ask how it started, I tell them the car park, which is accurate. She tells them the engagement party, which is more accurate. Between the two of us, privately, we understand it started earlier than either version, and the way that things which matter most begin before you have done anything sensible about them. Nothing appeared from nowhere. It simply, finally, stopped being filed. What would you have done if the person who called you in crisis turned out to be someone you had been very carefully not examining for 2 years? And have you ever carried something? A feeling, a moment, a small object you couldn't bring yourself to put down, waiting for a conclusion before you could let it go? Leave your answer in the comments. If this one stayed with you, a like and a subscribe means I'll keep making them, and I'll see you in the next one.